Mr. Kevin Campbell, and he's the manager of Fleet Services and Automotive Procurement. Welcome, Kevin. We're ready.
Very good. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So my name is Kevin Campbell. I'm the manager of Fleet Services and Automotive Procurement for the City of Chicago. For the past 17 years, I have been coordinating all of the vehicle and equipment purchases for all city departments and agencies. That is a fleet of over 10,000 vehicles. And this morning, I'll say good morning to everyone. It's 8 o'clock in the morning here in Chicago. I've been asked to talk about some of our vehicle reduction initiatives, which have been focused primarily on light-duty vehicles. But before I get into that, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of our city fleet. So I'm going to start this presentation here. Can you see my screen, everyone, hopefully? Can everyone see the first slide? If so, I'll get started. Is it appearing?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. All right, so just a quick overview of the City of Chicago. We were incorporated over 200 years ago. Our area is over 600 square kilometers. The city is divided into 50 wards. Each ward has an alderman, which is their elected representative within the city council. Our population is around 2.7 million, making us the third largest city in the United States. And our annual corporate budget is $3.8 billion. This is a pie chart showing how the budget is broken down. The largest department within the city is the police department with a budget of approximately $1 billion. Second is the Department of Aviation, and then the fire department. Transportation manages all of our streets, family and support services, and then this is my department here, fleet and facility management. We're responsible for all of the city's buildings, vehicles, and equipment, all of those assets, and it's a fleet of over 10,000 vehicles, and I'm going to show you a few of the highlights of our fleet. So refuse collection is a big part of most municipal operations. This is our typical refuse truck. We have over 500 of these units. Snow removal, we're getting into the winter season here, so we have over 300 trucks prepared to spread salt and push snow. Hopefully we'll have another mild winter as we've had for the last few years, but they're always prepared. The citizens of Chicago expect to be able to get to work in the morning regardless of the weather, and we do everything we can to help them achieve that. Street sweeping is also a big concern here in Chicago. I talk to people from many large cities, and they usually share with me when they come to Chicago that we are one of the cleaner large cities, and that is due largely to our street sweepers, which we have 80 of operating throughout downtown and the rest of the city. There's regular sweeping routes. My side street where I live was just swept yesterday in preparation. They want to clear all the leaves for the upcoming winter, and so this is a very major concern for us. The police department, we have over 3,600 vehicles in the police department with almost 10,000 officers. That means there's a lot of vehicle sharing. These vehicles typically never stop running. They can be running 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week. When we retire a police vehicle after 8 years, there's often over 200,000 miles driven on that vehicle. And then the fire department with almost 700 units. This is a typical fire engine. We also have ladder trucks, ambulances, and many support pieces as well. So this is another one of our key fleets here in the city. And the Department of Aviation. We have 2 airports under our control, Midway and O'Hare airports, and all of the vehicles and equipment that support those locations are purchased and maintained by my department. And then water management, being on the shores of the largest source of fresh water, surface fresh water in the world, the Great Lakes. It is a key responsibility of this department to maintain the integrity and the cleanliness of that water, to make sure that it is being used responsibly and that wastewater is properly treated to avoid pollution. Okay, so this is an outline of the city of Chicago, and we have 4 what I call all-purpose shops, which will fix any type of vehicle or equipment. Then we have the 2 airport shops. The north shop is at O'Hare Airport. The south shop is at Midway. This is a light-duty shop, which is focused, mainly on those pieces. We try and put those in a separate location so that the technicians who know how to fix the large pieces of equipment, like the fire apparatus, can dedicate their time to that. And then this shop is dedicated to the light-duty equipment. There's an off-road shop. Similarly, we want to put those people most familiar with off-road equipment, working on maintaining that. There's a dedicated shop for ambulances. We're looking to maybe roll that out into some of the other shops. But for now, we are still dedicating one shop just to ambulance repair, since that is such an important aspect of our operation. This north shop here, which I just showed the dot for, is both red for fire and blue for streets and sanitation. So that's maintaining all the fire apparatus and also the trucks and sweepers. This is a shop which we're looking to relocate and build a new facility for, because that is such an important aspect of our operation. And then these 4 light blue shops are our police garages. We want to maintain coverage throughout the city, so if there's ever an issue with a police vehicle, they have something close by which they can use as a resource. In addition to these fixed shops, we also have 24/7 road service and towing available to all of our customer departments. Overall, the fleet operation is over 600 employees. And as I mentioned before, we're servicing over 10,000 pieces of vehicles, 10,000 vehicles and pieces of equipment. Okay, so this is the subject I wanted to talk about today: how to reduce the size of your fleet by using technology. Step 1, which I'll go into first, is to remove vehicles with low utilization. And I have a pretty simple report, which I'll show you, which uses technology to identify those vehicles and target them for removal. Step 2 is to replace occasional use vehicles with car sharing. If you don't have a car sharing program in place, something where people can use a vehicle when they need it, but not have it dedicated to them, then it becomes very difficult to remove those occasional use vehicles. So I'll show you what we've done there. And then step 3 is to find those areas where a shared pool isn't available and make your own. And I'll show you how we've done that using a technology called Fast Fleet. And then the 4th step is to take all of those vehicles that can't be eliminated, shared, or pooled, and put them into a leasing program so that you can get them on a sustainable replacement schedule. And in my view, a sustainable schedule for a light-duty, non-emergency vehicle is 5 years. Optimally, I'd like to replace that vehicle every 5 years so that the driver is in a reliable unit and that I can also remarket or sell the returned asset for a good return. Once you get past 5 years, typically you'll see some losses there. Okay, so step 1. This is what I use to determine which vehicles can be targeted for reduction. And it is a very simple report. All it shows is the unit number, its assignment, its classification, and then the last column is what I'm sorting by. It is the last fuel date. So whether a vehicle is working on site or whether it's driving throughout the city, it's burning fuel. And the best way to tell if a vehicle is being used is to check its last fuel date. This is what we found. We've done meter readings and maintenance schedules, but we found the most direct way to find out which vehicle is being used the least is to sort by that last fuel date. Now, there might be a very legitimate reason why this first vehicle hasn't fueled since May, but it might be in for repairs. It might have an accident. But in general, if that vehicle is active service, we're going to go ahead and contact the department, find out what's going on with that vehicle, and if it's good data, if that vehicle is occasional use, we're going to go ahead and want to roll it into one of our reduction programs. So the first reduction program is car sharing. The most cost-effective way to get a city driver where they need to go is to eliminate the city asset entirely and use someone else's vehicle to get them there. And luckily here in Chicago, we have several car sharing programs. Now these vehicles are owned by the contractor. They're not owned by the city. And what we do is we contract with them for a fixed hourly rate, which includes the maintenance, the insurance, the mileage, and the fuel. And we put that whole thing together as a fixed package. And when we can offer this to the departments and we tell them, hey, you have a vehicle, you haven't used it since May, we're going to remove it. And then they always say, well, how do I get to my meetings? That's when we offer them this car sharing program. And this is something that's been very successful for us. We've signed up over 1,000 city drivers for this program. We've removed over 150 light-duty non-emergency vehicles, which is a 15% reduction in our city fleet. And so that frees up workload in the shops. That saves us money on capital replacements. And we do per mile calculations every month. And this actually comes in cheaper than a city-owned vehicle. So really there's no downside. It's less expensive and we don't have to make the investments or have any of that capacity within our shops. So anytime you can put a driver into a shared vehicle, that is absolutely the way to go. And so this is kind of our first focus on how we're going to reduce our city fleet. And people have said, well, that's great because you're in Chicago, you have 2 programs. What do? You know, we don't have car sharing in our city. So I went on Zipcar's website, and there's other companies throughout the world that do the same program. This is just a list of cities that Zipcar offers car sharing. And if you look at the link on top, I think the key word there is universities. What they really will focus on is if a city has a university, that is a pool of drivers who typically do not have their own vehicles, but who like to, be mobile. So if your city has a university, what I would recommend if you want to bring car sharing into your city is to partner with that university and have them contact Zipcar. This is a web page. You know, they're looking for people to come to them saying, we want to set up Zipcar in your community, and they will respond, and hopefully you'll have some success there. So this is how we were able to contract for car sharing. We put out a request for sealed bids. This is our typical procurement process. And we received 2 bids, and we reviewed them, and we awarded to the low bidder. We were initially getting our drivers into vehicles for $6 an hour, which to me is just an amazingly low price. Since then, through price adjustments, it's closer to $7 an hour. But even so, far and away, this is the most cost-effective way to transport our employees. And this is the reason why the car sharing companies can offer such a low price. So I'm going to explain this graph here. It's a little busy, but the public, this is the primary user of car sharing. This is the orange curve here on the graph. And when they're using a vehicle is typically evenings and weekends. Now that is totally opposite to when a city employee is typically using a vehicle. City employee is going to be using it during the workday, Monday through Friday. So when you add up those 2 curves, you get this utilization profile here. And this is exactly what the car sharing companies want. They want consistent usage of these vehicles. They're only making money if the vehicle is being driven. And so by partnering with a city, they can even out their usage profiles and get up to this 70% plus utilization. So this is why the car sharing companies, in addition to all the the PR benefits of working with a city to reduce cost and reduce vehicle counts, there is also a bottom line there for these car sharing companies. You know, this is going to help them to run those vehicles profitably. All right, so once you have the car sharing program awarded and it's rolled out, the next step is to let all of your departments know that this is a program that is being offered. And this is how we did it. We sent out a letter to all the drivers of all the vehicles, all the department vehicle coordinators, to let them know this is an additional service that is available for their drivers. And I really want to emphasize that you should focus on marketing this program to your drivers as an extra benefit, because really that's what it is, and that will encourage them to sign up. The other thing to make sure you're doing when you're setting up car sharing is to get your budget within your department. The last thing you want to do is offer this to a department and say, oh, and by the way, it's going to cost you $5,000, because frankly, nobody's going to sign up. So what we did is say, our department's budgeted for this. Your drivers get to use the vehicles. As long as they use them within the program parameters, there's absolutely no charge to anyone. Now, obviously, all of the drivers are going to be responsible for speeding tickets and parking violations. But if they're using the program properly, all they do is they reserve the vehicle, they return it, and there's no additional work for the department. So they really like that. So as I said, don't pass the sign-up fees or the usage fees to your customers. Just say, here it is. Our department's funded. We want you to use it, and encourage them to do that. And don't put up any cost barriers whatsoever. And then to focus on those vehicles. Who's using a vehicle once a week, twice a week? Those are your optimal drivers for car sharing. If somebody needs a vehicle 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, you do not want to put them in car sharing, because that's when it no longer becomes cost effective, because you're paying for 40 hours a week for that person to be in that vehicle. If they're in a vehicle, I'd say 8 to 10 hours a week, it's going to be a very cost effective program for you. And then because these programs aren't free, how do you pay for them? You reduce your fleet size. So conservatively, every vehicle, light duty vehicle you take out of your fleet will save you $6,000 to $8,000 a year in avoided capital, avoided maintenance, insurance. And so this is how you pay for those programs. And then it just becomes a virtuous cycle. You get more people to sign up and use car sharing. You keep reducing the size of your city-owned fleet. All right, so this graph here shows, or this image, where are the Zipcars? They're all, downtown. And as you get away from downtown, there's going to be lower coverage. So anyone who's down here, this is who I want to be using Zipcar. I want to remove as many of these downtown administrative vehicles as possible because, an added bonus, downtown parking, that can be hundreds of dollars a month just for one parking space. So just taking a city vehicle out of downtown, ignoring all the other cost savings, just the parking alone, you're going to save hundreds of dollars every month. But there's always going to be some areas like this where you can't find a car share. And this is actually where our fleet headquarters is. So what we had to do here and at about 20 other locations throughout the city is set up our own pool of cars. And the way you do that is you determine all the vehicles. We have GPS in all of our vehicles. So you figure out who's parking at that location. Run this at 1 a.m. That way you know when the vehicles are housed overnight. You use that technology, figure out where all those vehicles are. And here I have 11 vehicles. Now, what I'd like to do is take these 11 vehicles and put a carpool technology into them, and then see which ones are being used, and then reduce the fleet. I, conservatively can probably cut this from 11 down to 6 vehicles. And what you do is you issue these cards to everyone who needs to access the vehicles. You're signing up for an account, and this is a website. The technology is the same as the contractor's shared fleet, but it's your own website. These are your vehicles and your reservation page, and you control who can use what vehicles when. The drivers go on here, it's self-serve. You log in, it shows you which vehicles are available. And it's just like booking a hotel online. People are very familiar with technology these days. And if they don't have to talk to an operator, then they can just go on the website here themselves and it's a very cost-effective program. It's very trackable. You can always now tell who had a vehicle. So if there's ever an issue, you can identify them immediately. And then they book it, they use the vehicle, they return it, and then that's it. There's nothing else to the transaction. So this is a great tool for putting your own pool together and managing it very effectively. So obviously, anytime you're sharing vehicles, people are going to need to be held responsible. So what we always tell people, just like when you're renting a car, from a rental company, look at the car before you get in. And that card that I showed, it becomes your key. You use that card to access the vehicle. So the technology is wired in to the vehicle's electronic locks. It scans the card, it recognizes the driver. If the driver has a reservation, it then unlocks the car. The keys are in the vehicle. A lot of people are very uncomfortable with this, but I will tell you that this technology is now worldwide. And this is a traditional vehicle with keys. As technology continues to advance, so many cars have keyless start. And that makes this technology even more seamless, that the person just gets in and then they push the start button. So you don't even have to worry about the keys. And so that's been great as we're upgrading the fleet, that we don't even need to worry about putting the keys in the vehicles anymore. You can just hide the fob somewhere in the vehicle, and that way it will be sensed and it will start the vehicle. And then number 4 is probably the biggest issue, is making sure people return vehicles on time. Because if they don't, then the next driver is often stranded, and that's when you have to get on the phone and start trying to find vehicles or putting people in other vehicles. So there is some management involved in these types of programs. But if they are managed properly, it becomes at the end a big time savings, because 90% of the reservations require no oversight. They're just being self-managed, and then you just need to have someone get involved when there's issues. All right, so I've been using Zipcar here since 2011, but we recently put out a proposal for the new contract, and we have a new bidder here, which is called Merchants. The technology is very similar, but seems to be more up to date. You know, the website we're currently using is over 6 years old, so I'm hoping in 2018 we can upgrade all of our fleet sharing technology and move that into our system. And at the same time, I'd like to put some new vehicles in so that we are able to upgrade not only the technology, but the vehicles. And nothing draws people to a program like new vehicles. If they know that the vehicles are new and clean, then they're more likely to use it. All right, and so I'd already talked about utilization. So for us, then working with the car sharing companies, the goal is to get up to 70% utilization. And this is a graph of daily utilization. These are the weekends here, the valleys. So you know the people who are working Saturday are using them, but it's pretty low compared to during the week. And what you do, how do you get up to 70? Well, this vehicle probably, this location, I should say, probably has a couple of extra vehicles. So the really neat thing about this technology is you can move a vehicle from one location to another. You don't need to post an announcement. People are just booking the vehicles that are at that location. And as long as there's a vehicle available, people don't really notice if you've reduced the fleet from 11 to 6 vehicles. It's only when you over-reduce and people aren't getting the vehicles they need that they start to notice. And that's an issue. We don't ever want to have an employee need to get to a work location and not be able to get there. That's not cost effective. So you always want to have some extra utilization. You don't want to cut things too thin. I know some cities have had some issues with that. So you always want to get the resources out there, but you want to track them to make sure that there's never an excess, because really that's where your savings comes in, is trimming the excess. All right, and then step 4 is leasing. So there's some vehicles like an animal control truck, like a pavement striping truck, that a work truck with somebody's tools in it. They're out there every day. We're not going to put them in Zipcar. We're not going to have them share that vehicle. They need that vehicle all day, every day. In those cases, what I've moved to is leasing. And what you want to do is this is our light duty lot here. And you can see it looks like a used car lot. And we want to get rid of these vehicles that are down all the time. Because if a vehicle's down in your shop, it's not working, and obviously. And, you know, we don't want that. We don't want unreliable vehicles out there, but we don't have $40 million to spend on our light duty fleet. So how do you accomplish it? You move to leasing. The great thing about leasing is you only have to pay 1 year at a time. The other great thing is that if you get the budget office to sign on, now they've committed to funding that year after year. They can't just say, oh, we're not going to pay the lease. You know, that's what they'll do with purchases sometimes. They'll say, we're not going to buy any new vehicles this year. Just do the best you can. If it's a leased fleet, they can't do that. They know that they're a partner with you financially, and they have to make that payment every year. So it's a good program. If you've recognized that certain vehicles are necessary and identified them and upfit them properly, and then you get your budget office to agree that this is an important program, now everyone's on the same page and you're able to fund that consistently. And the budget office likes that because they know every year how much that leased vehicle fleet is going to cost them. So of those 850 vehicles I have left in the city fleet, I've moved over 400 of them, light duty, non-emergency units, over to leases, and I want to continue growing that program here as well. All right, so this is why we got into leasing. You know, every year the budget office doesn't give us quite enough money to buy as much as we need, so we delay the purchases. What do you do then? You run vehicles that should be retired. What happens? They break down and you start spending money on repairs. You spend more money on repairs for some vehicles than the vehicle's actually worth. And that is a bad financial decision. But if that driver needs to get out and do their job, sometimes you have to do that. And what does that mean? You run out of money and you just start it all over again. So this is why we got into leasing, because it gives us a consistent, effective, and efficient way of putting vehicles into our fleet that we know we need. It gives us the flexibility to change the models. You know, once we buy something, typically we'll keep it, you know, for up to 10 years. And with a lease, you can make those changes as needed. And so here's some guidelines that we have put together in the 7 years we've been doing leasing. And we're actually putting on our new lease agreement next year. We have several potential bidders poised to give us some hopefully very competitive pricing. But because it's kind of a lot of moving parts to a leasing program, we're going to do what we call an RFP, a request for proposals. And the reason I would recommend this, I only do this when it's necessary because it takes a long time to evaluate, but it gives you some more flexibility on who you want to work with. You don't have to take the person who gives you the rock bottom price if they're not providing you the services that you need. You can work with higher quality suppliers who have been proven, who can really be partners and give you guidance because of their expertise in leasing. You know, initially I went into 4-year leases, and the leasing company ran some calculations for me and told me, you know, it'd be more cost effective to go with a 5-year lease, which is why we moved to that. So those are the types of things you can get if you're able to be more selective on who your leasing partner is. Always focus on factory ordered units. You're going to get the best price concessions. Here in America, you know, the manufacturers are very aggressive with government price concessions. So that's very helpful in keeping our prices down. So before you order a vehicle and just replace what you have with the exact same thing, we always like to look, you know, evaluate those deployments, make sure you're getting the right vehicle for the job. It's that tightrope. You don't want to put anyone in something too small, but you don't want them in something that's, you know, more than they need. Here's another important thing: standardize your fleet wherever possible. It's just going to make things easier in terms of redeploying units, ordering units. I like to, you know, limit the choices to 3 or 4, because in reality, the leasing company can get you whatever vehicle is built. But if you just kind of pick the best units, you know, the proven winners, and deploy those throughout the departments, that's usually successful. The next bullet is very important. If you're leasing a vehicle, purchase insurance with it. This limits your liability and actually reduces your costs because you're buying it as a package. And the insurance company and the leasing company are very comfortable with that arrangement. This is something I'm looking into with the new agreement. Right now I pay a flat monthly rate for maintenance. And it's definitely a cost savings over maintaining the vehicles in-house. But I want to look at a la carte. I want to look at maybe just pay-as-you-go maintenance, because I think especially in a lot of the light-duty cases where all they're getting is oil changes for the first 50,000 miles and maybe a rotation, I think that's going to be a lot cheaper than just paying a fixed rate based on the purchase price of the vehicle. And then the last point there, as I already mentioned, is use that flexibility that's inherent in leasing. If a vehicle isn't working, return it and get the vehicle that will work. Because you have that option, and the leasing company can market that for you and get you, your money back and put those drivers in the proper vehicles. So just to finalize, finish up a last thought. People ask me, why should you diverge from what you're doing today? Why not just keep doing what you're doing? And I think the main reason is because it's not working. Driving an old vehicle that breaks down all the time doesn't work. You have to figure out a way to improve that. And everyone knows there's always room for improvement. But really the last point I want to make is that, as fleet managers, we are tasked with, being proactive. And, there's plenty of consultants out there who would love to go to your mayor and say, we have a better way. And your fleet manager isn't, he's not looking into these things. He just does things the same old way. And so you have to show that you are proactively making these changes, because ultimately, if you aren't, then really you're not doing your job. And so, you run the risk of someone else coming in and doing that job for you. So thank you very much for your time and attention. This is my contact information here. I think this presentation will be shared later as part of the video. So I just wanted to, make that available to anyone who wanted to contact me. I'm always happy to try and answer any questions that people might have to the best of my abilities. And thank you very much for your time and your attention. And I'm happy to take any questions now.
Thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
So now, participants, if you have any question for Kevin, could you please send it in? Do you have any questions? Kevin, there was a question. I'm going to put it forward for you from, one second. From a man called Mr. Mateus Tembe. I think he works for the municipality in Mozambique. And his question was, in your experience, Chicago experience, what has been the role and strategy of communication to make this initiative successful in the city? Would you have been the major changes for the communication strategy if Chicago was a rural municipality, considering that resilient strategies for cities are different from those that are observed in rural areas? Can I repeat that?
No, I think I got it. So I think I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we are kind of lucky here in Chicago that we have, these companies that are already present. And that, if you contact the companies, a lot of times they are, very interested in working. You don't have to have 1 million residents, to get some of these programs involved. All you need to do is have kind of a pool of vehicles that can be utilized by the residents, and students is always a big plus. But they love having a partner. If the municipality is contacting them, they know they're not going to have to do as much legwork or red tape, if you will, to get their programs involved, and that makes things very appealing for them. But I do agree, communication is very important. This wasn't my idea initially. This came from one of the finance directors downtown, who really was just crunching numbers and said, we should be focusing on other things besides doing oil changes to cars. And he was right, because it's expensive, and there's people who do it better than us. And the way to really be cost effective is figure out what you can do efficiently and focus on that. And the things that you can't do, be honest and say, we can't compete with the marketplace here, and partner with somebody who does it more cost effectively. Because as I mentioned, managers, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to make those decisions, which sometimes aren't easy, but if you have the data to support your position, then you can show that it's the right thing to do. So I do agree, communication is very important. And in terms of setting something like this up in a rural area, it's very important that the people who are making these decisions know the environment that they're in. I always hesitate to give too much authority to someone coming from the outside, because they don't know the environment there. So that's why it's really important for people who are involved locally and know the landscape to be integrally involved in these decisions, because if that background isn't there, then you can't just drop in an idea from somewhere else without taking that into consideration.
And Kevin, we have another question from another participant called Christine John Olafson, and he's asked, the platform that you use for car sharing within the city for the city employees is built on Zipcar platform. If so, how is the agreement between you and Zipcar? And do you know any other cities that are in similar collaboration with Zipcar?
Yes, so it is the Zipcar technology. It's called their Fast Fleet program, and I believe their website is fastfleet.net. Their upgraded product is called Local Motion, which looks like a good product as well. But then, as I mentioned, that Merchants Fleet Share is our low bidder for this time. And the way it's set up is typically you'll pay for the hardware, which can be $100 or more. You'll pay for an installation, which can also be $100 or more. And then what we do is we pay a per month per vehicle fee, which in our case is $65 a month. And that's it. There's no cost for signing up. There's no cost for the website. So I have around 100 vehicles in the fleet. Cost me around $6,500 per month. So really, by reducing my fleet by 10 to 15 vehicles, I've already paid for the program. And as I mentioned, we reduced the fleet by 150 vehicles. So it's been a great return for us. So there's lots of companies out there, in addition to those three, but that's typically how they're structured.
Does anybody else have a question? Okay, if there's none, Kevin, do you want to wrap up?
Well,
Any last final?
Yeah, my last thoughts are thank you very much for the opportunity. I think it's great when people, share ideas. I receive calls from municipalities all around the world. I also am constantly contacting people from all over because, really this is how these good ideas get shared. And, we kind of have a partnership to do things more efficiently. That's, what we're all really in business to do. So I just wanted to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share what we're doing.
Well, thank you again, Kevin, on behalf of Uraia and UN Habitat, and my boss, Diana Lopez, and my other boss, Jean-Francois. We'd like to thank you for taking this time. Oops, sorry, there's actually another question. Okay, thanks. All right. Kristen says thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and it's been wonderful, Kevin. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
So now we'll end the meeting.